Hello everyone and welcome to another Third Aged Reforged. My name is Fodder and today for you I have another battle for the Spawn of Sauron. We haven't had one of these for a while, but with the new patch we've been able to have one of these battles for you all today. And this one is made by not Horton, who obviously has made most of the previous ones you've seen, but by another member of the Spawn of Sauron community called Outfit, who I was able to actually be involved in this battle. This is one of our usual beta testing ones to try and do balancing, but I thought it was a good one to show some of the ways that the mechanics are slightly different in 9.5 than you may be used to. And it was just a bit of an interesting battle in terms of some of the ways that maybe some of the old meta didn't work. Plus, there was a good variety of different units on the field, and it was just interesting in terms of some of the tactics that different teams used. As I said before, I am in this battle, so you'll be able to get to see me, and I'm the Horde faction of Mordor, so living up to my name as usual. I'm going to skim over the army competitions. Now, one of the things that's going to make doing the army compositions a little bit difficult is that actually we have a lot of ambush-based units, and one of the things we notice is that for some reason the entire map is an ambush location. So actually you can hide anywhere if you're an ambushed unit. But we'll go over and do as best we can. So we're going to start over here. And as you can see, the battle starts in sort of a forest area. This is called the the Siege River Fort, basically, and it's meant to be a location near the border where the invasion begins, and the sort of the alliance of good races are trying to hold out. But we have Gundabad here that's going to be controlled by WK. He's one of the developers of Reforged, and has made a number of maps which you may have all liked. He's got some which are on Pikemen. He's got some halberds. He's obviously got some trolls. You can see them; they're very handsome, in fact. He's got some more halberds, so he's very halberd focused, which is going to be good. I will start the battle going slightly, but I'll keep an eye on it because it does start with a cavalry battle outside the front. Spoilers. What I would say is every time I do say that they are bringing, remember this is a scenario, so we are forced to bring these units. We do not use them. Not that we have a particularly bad setup. Also joined here by Marty Greymantle, who was first time I've played with this gentleman, but he was very good and part of the clan war. He's got some snow trolls. He has our only artillery piece. He's got some Goblin King bodyguard, which you can see there. There they are with their lovely red uniforms. He has some heavy goblin spears. They look pretty much as you would all expect. He has some archers as well. You will see a lot of these spikes down. They're a little bit far back. I didn't put any spikes down myself because I thought that we weren't really in any issue. We also joined here by Master Blaster. He has a lot of Orc Fodder. People think that Orc Fodder are my favourite army because they got Fodder in the name. It's actually Snarger. I think they're slightly more entertaining because they're even worse than Orc Fodder. Although I have the feeling that nowadays it's not really the case because they're free. A lot of Orc archers you can see there. He also has some more sort of mid-tier Monoron Guard here, which is a good spearman unit. You can see them there. And here's a good couple lines of them. Followed up by some Maulers, which is probably going to be the backbone of most of what he's going to be up to and what he's going to be doing. Which are going to be really useful against some of those sort of higher armoured units. He's got some infantry here at the back as well, which is sort of probably one of his better units. He's got some troll drummers, you can see them there. Look at that face. It's a face that only mummies can love. And some Olokai. He also has some more heavy maulers at the back here. See them there. And he's got the Black Legion, which is going to be very instrumental as we go forward. He's got 2 units of those. He also has some dismounted Temple Inquisitors. And they're going to be backed up with some Sauron's Will. At the back here, you can see myself. I have some Minas Morgul bodyguards for my general's unit. We have some infantry here. Nothing particularly exciting here. Okay, some Temple Guard for my missile infantry. I got some heavy infantry here. I'm very similar to the other Mordor army. I don't think I have much in the way that's particularly different. I have slightly more maulers, slightly fewer sort of fodder units. Again, you'd be surprised. I got some javelins as well. But otherwise relatively similar. And then the last force, I'm going to have to be hunting through the forest. Here we go. So Tundra Fox, and living up to his name, taking sort of a Tundra peoples of the sort of Viking age here with Rodar. He's got some nobles for his cavalry. I do have some some Black Numenorians is my cavalry, actually. The other Mordor army does not have any. And he's got some Klansmen. He does have some Rangers as well. A lot of Klansmen there. Really nice Pike unit because they got their shields as well, which makes them slightly irregular for most Pike units because it means they can take a couple of arrows. And that's about all I can see. Most of his forces are unfortunately hidden. So that's it for the evil factions. We're just going to swing on over. Just going to look at the cavalry outside the city before we go inside. So we have the Arthedain forces here. I'm not going to try and pronounce that unit. Well, let's give it a shot. So Fornost Iranat. So that's probably wrong. Please put in the comments how you think it should be pronounced. We've got some mounted company. Some here from Arcturus. And Goddess is bringing some Mithram Lancers. They are a Lancer unit, but they're also a missile unit, so you can see there that they do have their Lances, but they do also have their Javelins. And we have some Horse Lords. There are some hidden cavalry. Again, basically, we spotted these quite early on. There was going to be an attempt at sort of baiting us that's going to happen as these guys sort of pop in and pop out of existence. You can see there's the Knights of the Numinous as well, as they start appearing in, as they start moving around. In terms of the defences, again, we'll see how much we can see here as they start getting the position. We've got some Marksmen taking this sort of plateau here, followed by some units moving the position, some Pikemen's coming onto the side, some men-at-arms that are going to be backing them up. We've got some gate guards here, we've got some pikemen, and we've got some more gate guards. I'll just zoom in so you can see the gate guards. They look very similar to the old sort of knights, yeah, I think they were the Knights of Osgiliath, or the gate guards of Osgiliath, something like that. But you can see them there. I love their helms. I also like the face masks. I think they've come out really well in terms of their design and feel. They're a very strong unit as well, great for holding that choke point. Got some Dunedain Rangers, because why wouldn't you have some Dunedain Rangers? They can balance out the Rangers of Rodar, sort of evil sort of Rangers, I suppose. Here's a General's unit back here, which is the Wardens of the North. There you go, they look like the Steel Bowmen of before. Again, we're just going to swing through as quick as we can, because I know some people don't like seeing the army compositions. We've got some archers here. We've got some spears, just so you can see what they look like. Let's ping back. There you go. They're pretty much as you expect to see Lothlorien forces. We have some Sindar archers as well. And there you go. See? No, not much change in those models. They do have their own catapult as well, which will be sort of one-to-one in terms of siege weaponry. We have obviously a lot more spears and archers. Pretty standard sort of Lothlorien force that you would expect to see. We have some guardians here. Look at them. Look at that. Look at that helm. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's just weird to think these are 10 years old. Some nobles there. Just swinging through the streets with some blades. There you go. They actually have shields, unlike blade masters that obviously you usually don't. And we got some pikemen from Goddess there. I was hoping to find a particular unit, which is why I'm a little bit confused as I'm swinging around the forces. Not sure I'm going to find them, but we'll look over here. So this is the General's unit. This is the Blade Masters, as I was saying. So they've got the two-handers there, beautiful as they are. I'm not going to find the unit I'm looking for, but it's fine. We'll see them as we go out through the force as the battle progresses. You can see there's some Marines there to give them some Javelin units. We've got some Guard. There you go. So, the best thing they're going to get in terms of armour for Linden, because Linden normally are a little bit more light in terms of their setup. And obviously their backbone of their infantry with their light infantry there. Yep, I think that's going to be about it. I couldn't find the unit I was looking for. I expect they're in stealth, so we're just going to get up to full speed and get this underway. So, you can see here that the first thing they're going to do, they're very quick by the way, they're going to start moving into the trees. They want to try and set up this trap for us. Now, what we're doing on our side is we're basically pinging the locations of these troops as they go through and deciding how we want to do this. Now, we did try and do this battle once already, and they came around the side and they tried to hit WEK, so we're kind of expecting them to do something similar to that again. What I would say is there are a couple rules for this battle. Only two of the armies are able to come and help support out here with the Arthedains, and also the cavalry can't go inside the city. They have to try and do this battle outside. So really these are sacrificial lambs, although admittedly there may not have been too much for them to do once we had got to the city anyway, so probably best to make use of them now. So you can see they're all popping out of existence here as they start taking up positions within the forest area. And you can see that we're just moving the Horde forward. Like, there's two reasons, really. One, to be a show of force. Secondly, because we need to move them forward anyway, because we have to get towards the city. We do decide that we are going to try and clear out the cavalry before we move forward into the city, because there's no reason not to. We want to set up our positioning, but what I would say is that because we're so light on siege weaponry, when we do get to the city attack, it does go relatively quickly. We're not going to be sort of sitting around, especially because we don't want to be sitting under a lot of enemy fire. You can see here that we do have some spikes here. This will actually come back to hurt me later on, because I didn't realise he had a double layer of spikes, because I saw these ones previously. And obviously you don't take damage going through them one way, but do the other. And I kind of come in, again, spoiler alerts, from an angle, and I do something a bit newbie, but it just shows how you have to be careful as you walk your units around. We are very fortunate. We do have some wargs here. Again, these were hidden before, but you can see them. They're going to be instrumental in this fight out here. And you can see that we do have some maidens there, now finally fighting with their husbands, as previously in earlier patches they were in a different faction. They were with, I think it was in Broham. We also have some Borg's champions, again, fantastic anti-cavalry warg unit. Really fortunate to be lucky to have some of these forces. What I would say is, because this is a Spawn of Sauron, for those that don't know, is a bit of a... It's an RP campaign scenario-based game, which means that there is a timeline in terms of the order that battles happen. And some battles are swung in certain directions. They're not always truly balanced, as some forces are meant to lose to progress the plot, but obviously the significance of that loss, and sometimes it's fun to play battles you know you're not meant to win. This, again, is just a testing in terms of balancing, and there are things that we reviewed and considered changing. You can see here that the Lancers do come forward to try and bait the cavalry out, try and pull them to come forward, and maybe also try and get some cheeky shots into the Warg Riders. They don't want to have them faced early. Now, WK does something a little bit surprising. He didn't tell us he was going to do it, and it kind of threw us off guard. He sends his trolls forward, out by themselves, look, they're nowhere near him, and he charges out these forces, actually baiting out the Arthurdane forces from their hiding spot, but not the Lancers, who come to try and seek a little bit of revenge. Now, he has done okay. He has been able to spring that trap because he knew where they were, but he is a little bit overextended. He is out by himself now as he starts going in for this fight. Trolls now considered to be a form of infantry, which means that they are going to be losing hit points as they take these charges, and they're basically getting surrounded. So you can see that we're trying to rush forward. There's my mounted Numenorians trying to see off of these guys as best I can, chasing them along, and they're quite fast, but for some reason I have to keep clicking the orders to them. They keep forgetting their orders and stopping, which really kind of upset me, as I kept to basically kind of micromanage those guys, but luckily I didn't have much in the way of cavalry. As you can see here, that the light cavalry of Tundra coming in just to try and support WK, while we continue to try and have the jaws of our attack sweep through. Now, I think that as much as WK could have told us what he was doing, the plan isn't a bad one. It sprung the trap that was going to be forced. It meant that the trap was sprung on our terms rather than theirs. And you can see that they're now starting to remove and try and alter the positionings of their forces to try and make up for the fact that they weren't in the position that they wanted to be. And you can see now that we are starting to clear out some of the cav. We are starting to see them off. One of them does start going through the town, however, gets a good charge here on the side of his goblin archers, although he's not too worried because they are sharing ammunition, and it's not like they're going to be doing much once they lost their ammo anyway. It just keeps pulling them through. It did bring them into... so WK does have some Barrow Wights, which he is sending forward. For those who don't know about Barrow Wights, they kind of have sort of nothing but hit points, and they do struggle a little bit against this cavalry, but he is trying to sort of trying to surround them. You can see here that I've brought my Uluk high up and my mounted Numenorians to try and see off this force in the back line, which WK seems to be handling quite well. WK is also sending some of his halberds up for the top. Now, they do have bonuses against cavalry, but they do get caught out slightly here, finding this Lothlorien force. But luckily, the Lothlorien force seems to also be taken by surprise as well. Doesn't get the charge off as well as they probably wanted, and decide to bug out of that fight. Again, probably heading towards the south. Over on the other side, Again, sorry for swinging around as fast as I can. There's a lot going on in this early stages. You can see the devastation that the wargs are causing, backed up as well by the Klansmen. And the Klansmen, as you see, is a shield, spear, heavy unit. They're not too worried about having cavalry charges. As you can see here, they're having to sort of rethink their charge each time. And each time they change, they're moving into more Klansmen. Tundra doing a fantastic sort of work here about closing down these forces, and then what happens is the only way they can go is forward straight into the Maidens, who have got their Javelins, and they just block them off. So you can see that these guys down to 14 now as they struggle to walk their way through. The scouts just chasing them down, and each time the scouts sort of touch them, they stop them. But you can see here that the wargs did have a fight here. They did sort of have a little bit of losses here. They did struggle in the fight there towards the back. I think they just got extended themselves a little bit and then got some javelins thrown at them. But Tundra's still just taking command of this this I suppose expeditionary force of cavalry, and with Greymane there just sort of sweeping through and finishing them off. WK just kind of closing this prison for the remaining troops of cavalry, which did a number on one of his units of Burrow Whites. You can see the other one just popping out of existence. And now they've got nowhere to go except for just trying to charge into some expensive units to try and take off some of those hit points. Maybe try and kill a general. You can see now that there's just little pockets of cavalry knocking around, and they just keep trying to find. So I actually broke this unit with the fear effect as well of the Eunuch from the charge. And those guys will start to drop really quickly. I don't think we'll see them again. And the last real remains of the cavalry here, with any sort of serious numbers, is the 28 units of knights. You can see the hail of arrows coming in. Probably something that Grey Mountain probably didn't want on his cavalry, but it's certainly a very good way of beating up on knights, as they are susceptible sometimes to good concentrated fire. As you can see there, the javelins coming in, probably from Maidens. There you go. Throwing from the rear. They're going to get another shot off onto these guys. Again, great work from Tundra. I'm quite glad he's on my side. I wouldn't want to face him in battle as he comes in through the forest, which I don't think that they're going to be able to see or weren't aware of that was going to happen to them. Again, they're just charging through now, just trying to find space, trying to go for anything. You can see that they do go into some orc Fodder spearmen, which kind of actually kill one of them there, but they do just kind of keep trying to slow them down, trying to stop them. They are in a little bit of a loose formation, probably to try and absorb some of that charge. They do push their way through, and they continue to try and sort of work their way to harass. As you can see over here, I think there is one other Cav force doing what they can. You can see, yeah, here they go. So they're going for these Burrow Whites. You can see the Burrow White numbers dropping quite quickly, but there's only 6 left, so they're slowly going to get surrounded, and you can see that he's bringing over a lot of troops to help support them. But his Burrow White's taking a little bit of a punishment there as a final sort of, I guess, hurrah from those Cav. You can see here that I've got some of my Orc archers just kind of firing. I think I accidentally had them on fire at will, which was probably not a good idea, and probably lost more of our own units than we did the enemy ones. As they just make themselves going for whatever targets they can reach, and they do get a good charge on those archers there for the goblins, trying to weave their way through units. The thing is, they also don't know where our units are necessarily, because we've had so many in ambush as soon as they stop moving. So each charge they're going for, they're just praying that they're not going to run into a stealthed unit that's paused. And you can see now that they are starting to break. One of the things in the new version of the patch is that morale is more of a feature. It doesn't matter how high tier they are, they will sort of break and sort of more likely fight to the death if they have high morale, but they will break if they get too surrounded or too beat up. You can see that they do think about trying to get these knights back in. They start working their way over the bridge. I think it's just to try and move through and then pop out on the other side of the bridge. But we decided to let them go and focus on the last remnants here, the Lancers. They kind of see the Goblin Infantry, which is actually turning the other way from them, not facing what they should be. These are using the models of the old underground goblins, if you remember them. And then Tundra just comes in on all sides with light cavalry. 3. They're wavering. 2, and I think there's the last one over there near my Numenorians, which also came in just to finish them off. And I think they lost the count. There's 8 of them just out over the other way. I think they do now go into the city. I think they do get sort of to escape and just walking their way there through their units. And so that's the end of the cavalry fight outside. We felt okay about it. We didn't feel like we lost anything too valuable. A couple of trolls went down. We didn't lose too many of our cavalry either. Now, we didn't really know what we were going to have them do in the city fight, but we thought there were opportunities, because of the way the map's designed, that we might be able to get some charges through if we could break through some certain locations. Now, this is where some communication happens and a problem. We all decide to pick our own bridge to cross, and I thought I was going to be taking this one here, so I start moving my units over, but actually I'm meant to be taking this one, and it takes me a little while to realise my mistake. I will fast forward quickly while the units get into position, and we can see what kind of is going to await us. As I said before, there is the Pikemen'he here that's holding this sort of side with the Marksmen, which we already know of, that are on the Plateau. He's going to reinforce them with some men-at-arms. And you can see here that he's got some gate guards in reserve. He's done a couple of layering here in terms of having pikemen. Now, they are susceptible to catapult shots, but since we only have the one catapult, we're trying to hopefully keep it for as long as possible and really make the most of it. And that's it, really. So we've got multiple bridges, but we don't really have multiple entrances. You can see here that this third bridge just kind of leads to nowhere. So it's just 2 pushing points here. This one would, and really it's just kind of trying to get through as much as possible. Now, I did see something when I was looking here and setting up, which I thought was interesting, is that actually the line isn't extended as far as it needs to be. There is a gap here on this side. Now, luckily, I think he also realises it as he starts repositioning his men-at-arms, but there's ever so slightly a curvature here that we can get through. Now, my thoughts about this one was that I thought that actually that isn't as deep or as layered as it perhaps needs to be to stop a Horde fight. So, knowing that there were 2 units of Marksmen on the walls, what I decided to do is just send up a lot of my weaker units, hoping that he isn't going to bother firing at them, and use my sheer weight to push through, because I don't have the kind of units that I'd need to get through the layered defense of the men-at-arms and the pikes. I don't have anything like Rodar has, which can go toe-to-toe in terms of pike-on-pike stabby action. So I really just have to grin and bear it and know that I'm going to have to use a lot of forces to get through. Here you can see that Tundra has a little bit of, maybe about 1 throw of his Javies left. So there's 2 reasons. So firstly, he sends them up just to get a throw off, because actually the Gate Guard is a very valuable unit. And secondly, we hoped it might make some of his archers pop into existence, just so he could be assured of where they are. And he does actually get a little bit of popping forward. You can see that some of them do just appear out, and we can just confirm our suspicions of where they were. He comes over, he just kind of throws them out. You can see a couple of them taking the hits and falling over there. We really didn't have much in the way of ammunition. He actually pulls out the gate guards for fear that I guess we might have more. He loses a lot of his maidens in that, but they really didn't have much, and I think that having them sort of pull out from that front line and lose that formation was probably quite good. It kind of unnerved him slightly, I think, because I think he thought that they had more ammunition than he really did. And then he just kind of throws his maidens in just to lock that cavalry into the combat whilst the rest of his forces start moving across. You can see here that this is the epic charge of the Light Brigade of Fodder. Aptly named. You can see that I've got a big long sort of spaghetti here of forces, and I was really hoping that he might feel that this big blob was something that was worth firing at, but he doesn't unfortunately think that it's worth firing at, and probably quite rightly too, as they've got more expensive units. But I do send them forward anyway. They are backed up with some maulers, because I sneaked some of them in there in the hopes that they would be more useful. And my intention is to have the fodder just kind of hold this line here whilst I send better units through the flanks on either side. And you can see that they do unfortunately get a bit blobbed up here, so I will start having to reposition them shortly. But you can see one of the Maulers now heading in for this side, and the other Mauler will start following through. This unit here basically firing into the centre here, so I didn't have to worry too much about it. You can see here in terms of the centre, what's happening is that they've sent forward some of their just kind of goblin infantry, again just trying to draw some of that fire from the archers, which isn't really coming their way. But I think we did notice that because of the positioning, one of these units was firing a lot into the dirt, and I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the other one. You can see now, however, that quite rightly, the archers are trying to use fire arrows to try and break this force, but at this point they're so they haven't really lost anything, and because they're in sheer numbers that they're in, they're not really going to break anytime soon. Now, I did send one of the forces up here, but it didn't like it. Part of the pathing issues, I think. But I do make fantastic headway. You can see that the line's immediately starting to push through. And you can see there's only 1 or 2 forces here at its thickest. So I keep trying to realign these guys as best I can. But I've really seen a point to punch. And I do apologise if you can hear Cannonball there. He's just woken up, so he's sort of wondering what's going on, hearing his father talking to the screen. Over at the other choke point then, you can see that the fight has truly begun. You can see that they are using some goblin infantry just to try and work on those sort of pikemen, really, just trying to wear them down a bit. It's not going to be a fight that they're going to particularly enjoy. I don't think they have much chance of winning, but he is bringing up some Klansmen, which I think are going to help support that. But you can see he's taking a lot of fire here, mainly from the Troll Slayers, but also supported here by some more Marksmen, which are starting to sort of rain down. He's going to loose formation. So back over here where the majority of the main action is happening, you can see that I do break through. I finally get through that location. I start turning these pikemen, and now that they're not in formation, they're going to have real problems. And I actually bring up my Unlock High just to continue to sort of have that bleed, I guess, turn from a hemorrhage into sort of something a lot more deadly. And those gate guards from before that were a sort of reserve force now having to be brought in, and they are going to line up here. Now my thinking was that actually I'm not going to push that for a while. They can get into formation as much as they want. I might send a show force in there. But whilst they're there, I can continue to focus on this main line. Now, they do, however, send some Blade Masters in. They're going to be terrifying for my forces. I'm going to lose significant numbers against these guys just because of the forces I'm sending in. But I do try and send in some of my Maulers in the hopes that they might be able to get some good two-handed heavy hits. But again, the Fodder just continues to try and push in the hopes of anything just to try and get through and break that up. And you can see he's also got some blades in there as well. So it's a really tough fight with some really strong elites in there. Meanwhile, the men-at-arms and the pikes, they're not having much luck. I do recharge these guys now with some of my more mid-tier units of the infantry, and you can see that they are now fighting back-to-back in the hopes of trying to win this, but it's really kind of coming to the point where these guys are on their last legs. They do take a long time to break, however. They did hold out for a very long time. I think they ended up becoming fighting to the death, and I am supported by some Klansmen here, which I'm very grateful for because of their long pikes going to help sort of disrupt that force a bit more. In terms of this then, what happened was that I felt that I wasn't really going to get through all of these blades, so I do try and rechange my focus and try and consider whether I can maybe get through these spears after all. And to try and support that, you can see that I am bringing up my Javelin, although they're actually sort of masked a little bit by those Klansmen which are standing at the same point of them. You can see as well that the Marksmen now, either they've run out of ammunition or they're just repositioning, are starting to come off the walls here. You can see that the high ones are still up there. I think they also wanted to get a bit of position to shoot at me because they were struggling up there. I do send my own Goblin Archers, you can see them there, to try and work on these guys, but it doesn't go anywhere. Really, it's just a waste of ammunition. They are hitting them, but they just can't do the damage. And you can see that men-at-arms are now also being thrown into this point where I thought I could try and push against the weaker units, but you can see that the Horde is truly unleashed, and I'm just setting up I'm setting up my jabs, but they're over the top of the Klansmen, so you can't see them so well. In the main section, I've also suggested to my allies they try the same technique, and they have done so. You can see here that they're pushing forward with some very strong heavy tier units here from Tundra, backed up with some snow trolls, which are just trying to work on some of those troll slayers, in fact. So there you go, some troll on troll action, I suppose, in some respects. And they are just trying to get these guys and pursue them as they flee out. You can see some puffs of blood where they're targeting them as best they can. And then this force here just kind of just getting pushed around. You can see that they've got maybe one unit line here on the sides as the force just continues to push them back, and it's just the numbers is just too much for them, and they're going to break through very quickly. Like I said, the significant sort of blades and the concerning units are here. Again, fire is coming in the hopes to try and break them, but they really just haven't lost the numbers, and they're too big of a force to really make that happen. I break through again where I thought I could probably puncture. The men-at-arms not able to support the gate guards as much as they hoped, and there's the flood again. So you can see here that I found a point. There was only two units thick, and I'm charging through again with Tundra, using his Klansmen, backed up with my infantry to try and get to the Marksmen. Now, what I would say that none of this is done with shield wall either. It's just sheer pressure being applied. Now, I'm losing a lot of troops doing this charge, but I really think it's worth it. Mainly what I want to do is I want to trap these Marksmen up here, and I want to stop these guys as best I can, and I'm quite happy with this arrangement. I'm quite happy to let my heavy infantry fight his Marksmen, and I really just want to stop those fire arrows from happening. So you can see there's my Javelins after all. You can see there as well the men-at-arms still fighting. They're wavering here against my Olokai, but they are still fighting, but not really taking them down. And we'll just have a look at some of the punishment that I received. Not as many losses as I thought I would, especially when I was using Fodder. I was quite happy with that, and actually I think Tundra probably took the worst of it in some of that final fighting, seeing some of their large shields there. Again, though, the forces of the gate guards forced out of position, really just kind of bullied around on the battlefield, and now they're fighting sort of back-to-back against these Klansmen, which are more than capable of finishing up this unit. Really impressed with the way that the Klansmen came out. However, you can see here I'm still struggling against these elves. They're just a single line here, and I'm trying to push through. I really want to try and do something to try and stop these Blade Masters, and they're just unrelenting. They are brutal. They don't get tired. They don't stop fighting. I can't seem to stun lock them. As we zoom in here, you can see that I'm jabbing and poking them. I thought maybe if I use some of the Orc Fodder Spearmen, just from numbers, they might just be able to just keep pushing them with the weapons. And I even brought up some, so Master even brought up some Guard Spearmen just to try and help with this one. Just trying to keep them at bay, just keep trying to poke them back, because I'm losing forces like no tomorrow on that line. I actually thought that I'd have more luck pushing through there than the gate guards, and it didn't happen that way. The middle force has now come to try and support us, and you can see that we have broken those forces by some rear charging with the Klansmen. As they break through, they just weren't able to hold, and they actually fell back, some of the gate guards there, and you can see that they're now WK and Master and Greymane are just fully sort of position now, and they've now owned that first choke point. You can see he's parading his forces. I did less of that parading. I hid my forces. You can see them all there hiding behind this wall. These are the units I really didn't want to get shot at, so I hid them as best I could. But I start moving my units up now, and you can see that we got the troll drummers on their way forward here. But all in all, I'm relatively happy with the way this fight went so far. It could have got a lot worse. And you can see here as well, the Marksmen did try and get off of the ridge, but I was able to block them with some of my heavy infantry. This fight is one that they can win, but it seems to be taking a little bit of time, and they don't seem to be too happy with the engagement, in the sense that it's an uphill fight, and they're extremely tired against only a warmed up force, which I didn't like the idea of. I wanted to try and rest these guys as best I could, and I really didn't want to send in my maulers, I didn't want to send in my heavy maulers either, because they were also exhausted from just pushing and fighting for so long. So it doesn't take me too long when I start trying to send up reinforcements that I just decide that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and push some archers through, just to try and again do a similar thing to what I did before. But you can see now that I am just bringing up my units. Where I said that I had some problems on spikes, basically I jogged my Numenorians when I went to try and save WK, and they came in at a sideways angle into the spikes, and I lost maybe 4 or 5 of my horsemen needlessly. I do send in my Untitled now just to try and finish off the last of the Spearmasters, which are just backed up against this wall. They're still fighting away. I couldn't believe it. But as you can see here, just the sheer number of losses that I took. This was far, far more brutal than the previous previous choke point. Look at the devastation here against, and you can see he went to his knees to cheer as the final elf was ruined, and probably I could see why, because look at the death, look at the destruction they caused to my forces. Just those 2 units, absolutely brutal. The other units did fared a lot better, but didn't have to fight them. So here you can go. Here we go. Here, so I've got my Orc Archers. Now the Orc Archers can't win this fight as an actual melee, but what they can do is they can break up the formation. So I just start charging them through, and you can see, there you go, the Marksmen broken, fighting to the death. And now this is kind of all she wrote, really. And that was, again, trying to use the mechanic of pushing through. And it's all you can do, really, as Horde factions. The old tactics are still some of the best tactics, and especially now that we don't have the kind of glass ceiling that we previously had in terms of the way that units work. They do break. They aren't sort of impossible to defeat now. They don't always fight to the last man. So you can see now that the balance of power is still looking relatively good for ourselves, but it's not the end of the forces. We've only really fought the outer layer here. Start mopping up some of the remaining gate guards that we just kind of pushed through just from sheer numbers. And we start bringing in our forces, again, nice parade, orderly manner, considering they're orcs. There was a little bit of some skirmishing out here further out where they tried to chase down some of fleeing forces. You can see the scouts there and WK's units along with some snow trolls just tried to chase down some of the, I guess, the troll slayers and a few sort of units as they tried to flee back to the next tier. They do catch some of them. You can see that the snow trolls didn't pay off too badly from that. But we do hold up. We did consider pushing this choke point, thinking that this was an easy gimme, but it wasn't. It was actually just a way of letting them through, so they couldn't hold all sides, but what they could do is try and draw us in, and actually you can see here that we could take a much longer route, but again, they've blocked it off. So quite wisely, what they've done is, rather than trying to hold all these bridges, because there are actually now 4 bridges as opposed to the ones we took before, they're trying to just choose this kind of location where they can reinforce and support each other. And you can see them there repositioning their units as best they can to this place, and there's their catapult there. We do see their catapult, and we're trying to think how best we can deal with it. I do feel like in my discussions I'm looking... What's happened there? I'm looking to come up through here. They do have some spikes, but I'm not too worried about it because I'm not really looking to use my cavalry too much. I only have the 1 unit of it anyway. So I'm thinking of coming through here, just trying to use my sheer weight and coming in behind the catapult. Meanwhile, we've also noticed that we've got this ridge line here that we now have access to. We're actually thinking of setting up our own catapult to shoot down into the pikemen there who are mixed in with the spears, and we're a little bit worried about the Wardens of the North behind them, but we're hoping that actually we can just outrange these guys, and you can see them there well positioned. But overall, we're feeling relatively confident at this point. The lines themselves still relatively short, and only 2 people deep, which really, again, makes them susceptible to the pushing tactic we've had. As you can see there, that they now sort of try and stand over, worried a little bit about this flank, but it just, again, continues to make that line a little bit thinner. So we're not too unhappy about that situation. It's a little bit hard around the other side, but we're feeling relatively confident that the same tactic can work again, partly just because of how it's set up. So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit while we start moving and repositioning. We're really just talking about who's going to hit where and how we're going to try and support each other as best we can. Whether we wanted to hit all targets at once. One of the considerations we had was maybe we could just hit one side and then work our way through. And partly we do that in the sense that we decide that we're not going to hit that rear choke point that I pointed out before until we've sort of taken out this cluster. And we think that's probably the best thing to do is try and keep them on their toes by hitting multiple locations. So we do start moving our units around. I believe that WK decides that he's going to come and join me up over here. So you can see that we're starting to bring my units over with WK. We got this, again, the parading spaghetti line. And we work our way over. Now we do know that they've got hidden units. We don't know where all of them are, but we're still pinging them out to each other. As you can see that they are sort of repositioning their axe units, trying to sort of evaluate the situation as it can, because we're basically starting now to work our way over the bridges. You can see that we're starting to send sort of expeditionary forces, let us say. Weak units going forward that are either exhausted, tired, or depleted, or trash. And the idea is that they're kind of looking for hidden units, really. They're trying to bait hidden units. They're also trying to bait arrow shots. We don't really feel like some of these units are going to be so good anymore. Some of them are quite small. Some of them aren't really to the level that would have them hold out against some of these superior forces. So we think, actually, maybe we could just use them to scout ahead. As you can see, this is where the sort of one of the final stands is. And up here you can see some of the sort of final generals units there with some archers. So out they come, basically, and here they are, just kind of out in the open, saying, "Here I am, please shoot me. My lives mean nothing for the greater of Sauron's." And they don't really take the bait, unsurprisingly, but it does mean that we know that we can cross the bridge, which I suppose in itself is knowledge is power. We do make it so, however, that the spears now leave here. So again, the spears were looking like they go away, but actually, having said that, I think they do now rejoin, which they are going to. We actually thought this was a really big win for us. When we saw those guys leaving, we thought, even better. If those guys go, then we almost can't fail to push through that bridge. But they do return, and then they go away again. So we weren't quite sure what was happening here. We thought that, again, this could be a great win for us if it was only the one line. And then they went back, and then they went again. And they think better of it again, so they start going back in. The only thing we could think of was that they were just trying to get their lines as well placed as they could and just repositioning. I start sending forward my own scouts, 3 fodder units, just to try and see if there's any hidden forces. Again, I'm a little bit concerned about bringing up too much into this area, thinking that they might have some units knocking around. But they don't seem to, so I just can't stop bringing up dribs and drabs. You can see here that I've got another 4 orc fodder units bringing up the rear. So you can see that they are a very deadly scouting force, of course, that's making its way forward. Just keep trying, really. I just didn't want to be caught out of place. As you can see, yet again, the shuffle of the spears continues. But they do start moving the catapult now. Now, this confused us slightly. We weren't sure where the catapult was going. We were pretty sure that it was going to come down here to start its assault against Grey and against Tundra, which we were a little bit concerned about, because actually they had some of our better units, really, and we didn't like the idea necessarily of the catapult coming down. It's the wise choice. It's a big open area, and if we want to attack it, we're having to come around a corner and be hit. But the idea was that we were kind of hopeful that we could get through there. However, we noticed one thing, which is that they wouldn't be able to support their ally if we did attack this choke. We did wonder quite a long time about these chokes, but then we realised that there's 2 points of attack. One of them has 1 unit that we could see all by itself out here with the spearmen, although a little bit deep. And again, one of them over here where the majority of the forces are. But the other army can't easily get over here to support them. So you can see now that Tundra is making a real big show of force. He's bringing up large numbers with Master here just to try and force something. Now, there's 2 reasons for it. One, which is that if they leave it as it is, the forces will hopefully overwhelm them, especially that choke point on the far side that seemed to be by itself. The other one was that we might be able to have them draw units away. And you can see that the catapult is actually trying to get this long spaghetti line, getting a good hit there on some of the orc archers. Thankfully, just orc archers. Most of the units are working their way through, but you can see it did halt some of his infantry charge, as he was a little bit worried about moving them through while the catapult continued to fire. But they are at quite a long range, so they are happy with the situation as it stands. And to try and get them something to think about, Greymantle continues to try and have his goblins show to see if they'll take any shots there. As you can see, the fires shots coming in, but they're not as accurate as the first sort of round was. As you can see, Fodder and Maulers mainly going through. So again, nothing that Master would be too worried about losing to the catapult shots. Meanwhile, here at this point, you can see that WK is kind of supporting multiple flanks. We'll see his units with me, but he has sent some to support the other guys. And Great Mantle continues to try and make the bait. He really wants to fire at him, but they're not taking it quite rightly, and nobody can blame them for that. You can see the forces there lining up on the side of the bridge. This is the point where I decide to start my assault. Knowing that the catapult is going to be busy, I think, right, this is my chance to make it through. I knew we had one unit that was going to be stealth, which now does pop into existence. A little bit deeper than I'd like. 4 rows there of spears. And now they're starting to pop in more and more units. You can see here now there's a lot of these Javelin forces that suddenly appeared. And now I'm starting to think, well, maybe this wasn't the best place to attack after all. There are a lot of units here, which I wasn't originally expecting. I thought this would be an easy push through, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be that way. WK thankfully takes the initial charge into the face, going straight through. And there's another force here. There was a men-at-arms protecting those Javies, which we didn't notice either. So kind of caught out of position here, the Trolls. We did, however, at least unveil all of their tricky, sort of interesting units and backup forces. As you can see now that my cheaper infantry starts to engage alongside those Trolls in the hopes, again, trying to mess up that formation, try and push through. And actually, it looks early on like it might work. Having those Trolls there seem to be supporting, as you see the catapult fires going through. The Trolls there breaking up the formation does appear like I might be able to get in. And I do feel quite happy at this point. I've got some archers. Some of them have used up their ammunition, but you can see the Javies waiting. They still have a fair bit, but I didn't have another archer unit that was firing the odd shot. Fortunately, the Trolls, without being able to get too much support and are spaced out quite heavily, do start falling. The only advantage really is that they are firing into where the Trolls are, hopefully hitting some of their own men. But I do break through with some of my Maulers. Admittedly, though, as much as these guys are archers, they are elves, and my guys are exhausted and these guys are fresh. So it's not a fight that we can really win, but it is something to make them think about. I hope maybe it would have them reposition or something. Wardens now coming up to support these lines. They do realise that we are attacking in quite significant force here, and there you go. You can see that we start breaking through. At this point, I think, right, we've done it. We've done it. We've made it. We can't. This is going to be some great stuff. However, these rear forces now do start to plug up the gap. You can see that they bring in, they kind of shut down what I was doing before, and it had been going well. The axes on one side, the men-at-arms on the other side, and that push suddenly gets halted in its tracks, and I start sending out my own Oleg High in the hopes that that'll do something. Meanwhile, on the other side, you can see that they are having a similar situation here. There was a lot of stealthed units that popped out, although admittedly some of those Linden forces facing the wrong way, which I think is I think Tunja's quite grateful for, as he gets bogged down a little bit there. And he even tries doing a sneaky movement here, WK on the side, with some spears going up against the Barrow Whites, but it's not a fight he can really win, but it's just to let them know that they can get through there, which I think they did know about, hence why the unit's there, but wasn't but it is something we considered moving through. Fire arrows coming in again in the hopes to break that force. You can see that the Trolls that remain from WK just kind of went to try and quieten the Catapult, which has now repositioned itself. On this line, we decide actually that we just leave the forces there. He's got 2 units backed up with one another, and that's 2 units that we don't have to fight. We do leave some heavy Goblin energy there, just as a show, but we're quite happy for them to leave their forces there. We keep wanting to try and choose our battles, and this is where we continue to try and do that. Looks like what they want to do is they're really kind of just waiting now for the right moment to strike. But quite rightly, they've gone for this side. Now, there are 2 missile units that are backing up this side here. You can see Javelin forces as well as a bow unit. They're shooting over the top of their ally as they keep trying to push and squeeze themselves as close as possible to the light infantry to try and push through. But it is going to be a hard, slow grind there, especially with the support of those hidden forces that we didn't see. Meanwhile here, you can see that there seemed to be a charge by some men-at-arms or some units that were caught out. It was a relatively okay engagement for them, probably from support, but but they were only swordsmen, which, although they look pretty fancy, are relatively low tierage. Again, they're trying to just bait some more of those arrow shots into less useful units before they begin their charge here. And you can see the Klansmen going up to support. The Klansmen going to be pretty handy here. The swordsmen really just there to take the hits, but they do look very good for what they are. They want to try and set fire to one of the catapults. We weren't quite sure what to do with our archers. Our archers weren't really strong enough to pierce them. So we decided to try and set fire to them. You can see that there's the one troll unit still working his way forward. And we do actually get one of them on fire. Basically what it is that the goblin archers, we just had no idea what they would really be able to support with, because I'd been using my goblin archers quite extensively on our side and they just weren't killing anything. So we thought, well, actually, maybe we could just set fire to the catapult. The catapult making its way up here, which we're a bit worried about because I've started to really commit. I really want to push through here with WK. This fight, if we can break here, we can win. This is kind of... Everyone's devoting more and more resources and forces through. My Eunuchs, I've broken them through the line to try and work on some of the back lines here. And you can see more and more units being brought forward to try and fight at this location. And I don't blame them. I mean, this is a significant part of our army all in this one spot, as they just kind of keep layering and layering up more and more units into this sort of... I guess choke, really, to try and hold us and slow us down. You can see more archers coming in. You can see some archers in the background trying to fire. I still haven't... I've moved my temple guard up now to try and fire some missile fire. I'm targeting these troll slayers at the back with them in the hopes that that will try and just thin out the numbers, as I'm a little bit worried about them. And I do actually have my javelins knocking around here, trying to throw over into some of these juicier targets, trying to work for their blobs. Whether it's hitting my own units instead, I don't know. But this is where the problem starts. I'm very worried about this catapult. It's now made its way over. Now, what you can hopefully just see in the corner is that they are starting to break through that point where those burrow wights were fighting. As I send my Eunuchs in to try and stop this catapult, they are getting a lot of heavy fire, however, from the unit of archers, which was there. They popped out of existence for stealthing, but they are there. And you can see that I'm taking fire there from the guard units as well, shooting out towards my Eunuchs. I get some snow troll support coming in though, thankfully, to try and help me here. But we are against these staff masters there in their red cloaks. Just do look a little bit like, I suppose, a little bit too perfect in terms of their graphical design. But we are, for now, saving a lot of lives by stopping this catapult. You can see that they're trying to reposition it and move it around as they continue to take down some of these snow trolls, actually committing their Wardens of the North, because they really want to get this thing up and running. They want to get a fully operational catapult. And at this point, it's a do-or-die moment. I just think, right, either we're going to get through or we're not. I've got to try and break this formation. It's pretty deep now. This is not the case of sort of 2 units deep anymore. This is a good, healthy number of units, and I don't have the shield wall as the arrows continue to cause puffs of blood from my units as I send in more and more of my units. I'm telling WK that we've got to break them now before it's too late. But we do lose this battle here. As you can see, the catapult now reforming, and we'll come back to that shortly. We did lose the fight here for the most part, but we decide that we're not going to commit any more units to it, but rather allow them to keep their forces there. Instead, we tried to push through on this other side against these blades, but it's not going the way we'd hoped. So here we go. the catapult lining up, and it also frees up these forces to re-bolster that line as well. So we're kind of really concerned. There's our catapult firing. It's a little bit taken a while to get there, but you can see it did get on the ridge. But now that we're not facing that too much, we're a little bit worried about it. One thing they did do, though, is they did pull away more of those units, which actually allowed Tundra to just move past these pikemen. And there goes the shot. Devastating. I really thought that I was at risk of a rout there. But thankfully, I did push through some halberds. They just got through. They worked their way through this sort of side spot here. You can see they're just ones and twos working their way in. And it gets there. A sigh of relief for all of my orcs as these chosen few halberds get to the catapult and they start working the catapult crew. And I don't think they've noticed at this point as they start sort of trying to support. But me and WK now... The gates have broken. We're starting to make through. They need to plug it up quickly, but they've only got these spears here in reserve, and he's a little bit late to start moving. You can see all the cloaks suddenly turn blue as he resupports that. He pushes them into the line here, but he really needs to get them in the side as we continue to move more and more units in, and WK is getting through there. Now that unit of cav that broke through, really useful from Tundra. So they made it past the spears here, which was only really 11 of them, which you can't blame them for not holding, and they're actually dropping down from some archer fire. But with the cav through, that meant that we could really just charge down the artillery, and they won't be firing again. They do get down to small amounts, and you can see here now that the nobles trying to fire against that cavalry unit that made it through. And you can see that they're now bringing up the guard as well to just kind of support this fight. But it's a little bit too late. I get my cavalry through now. Very careful to walk past the spikes I saw previously. And now the charges begin as I start bringing these guys forward to just see what I can do, what kind of damage I can inflict. Not the easiest of targets I've gone for. There's a spear shield unit as much as they're meant to be... A sort of missile force, and actually I do lose a couple of units in this charge, which I was a little bit surprised about because I thought they were a missile unit, and then I realised what Linden forces can really do. So I see that they're trying to go back to the catapult with 2 forces, and I think, no, I'm not having none of that, not again. And I charge in with my Numenorians to finish that off, along with Tundra surviving like cavalry. And this is the point where everything I've got is committed now, and I've even brought up the troll drummers here in the hopes just to keep the morale going. We're starting to have a lot of significant losses now, and this is the point where we could have a rout, and a chain rout for us would be devastating. So you can see now it's just where I'm going to start the hammer and anvils and trying to work down these staff masters. Me as Steve, as cannon fodder, I don't know really how good they are. I haven't really checked them out, so I'm a little bit worried about them, but I can't stay too long facing them because they're not really in the front lines and they could just turn around and wallop me, and I'm a bit concerned about what kind of stats they have. So I just kind of try and move my units around, just keep trying to hit different targets as I can. You can see me coming in here for another charge, just trying to break these guys as much as I can, but you can see they're not really wavering. They've still got good units of their own. They haven't taken too many losses as I try and do this. You can see now the Witchram Hammer Guard trying to do their thing. We saw some shots coming from the back. And this is the unit I tried to look for before. The Wardens here in their white uniforms. They actually can shoot through multiple armors, units, individual units at once, and they can sort of, like a weird ballista shot or scorpion shot, they can work their way through. You can see they are shooting my Numenorians as they charge in, but it's not going to be enough, and I do get a charge off. However, I don't actually kill any of them. And I was a bit worried at this point. I thought, oh, crumbs. I just did a full charge to these guys, and I lost units and they didn't lose any. So we'll come back to that real quickly while I show you what's happening on the other sides of the battlefield. You can see here that these show forces, they're still show forces, keeping those guys locked down as best we can. They're still pushing hard here. Still a bit of a long grind. You can see more and more forces as they used up their ammunition has been committed, and again here just a big blob, and it looks like that's going to hold for a while. If anything, we're quite thankful that they kind of weren't able to keep holding this one bridge. You can see the first of the enemy generals starts to fall, but we're quite lucky that they weren't able to hold this location as we start walking more and more our units through this gap to join battle. As I continue to just try and cycle charge these guys, I'm losing units left, right and centre, and Tundra brings over his light cavalry to try and help. We are starting to take down their HP though. You can see now that they've lost 20, but they are starting to fall a little bit more. And it feels like it was just trying to break through that HP. As you can see, another unit there of nobles of the heavy cavalry come in, and that's when we start feeling that we're going to do this. We can start seeing them drop a little bit there. You can see that the charge is now starting to have an impact as the Richwell Scourge Raiders, which have gone for a very long jog from that battlefield, come to join. We were very worried about that force because, as I say, each shot could hit multiple units. And WK now closes the jaws, works his way around with his Witch Realm Blackguard, and we start to pen these guys in. We're still there with the drummers, just trying to keep these guys committed, because they could still break at this point. They have lost a lot of units, and we are starting to send in things like Marksmen as we start thinking about what next targets we can go for. You can see here that because of the way that they've had to commit forces elsewhere, Grey Mantle is able to start moving his cavalry through, which we didn't think we'd have much use for in the rest of the battle, through this gap now that it's undefended. You can see the spearmen now retreating as quick as they can. They knew that they probably weren't going to have a good final stand because they could be outflanked, especially now that the forces here are being removed off the battlefield. They're just down to 9. It doesn't take us too much longer with the support of the infantry to finish them off. So quite rightly, he's had to withdraw because he's now been turned, basically. He's been outflanked from that side. Again, not much moving through here, which is why I'm not focusing on it. They're still just struggling with that grind. There's been a lot of losses on both sides. They've got the hill advantage. They've just got superior forces, and it's just becoming a bit of a difficult fight for them. And you can see all these Blade Masters now fighting in the front lines. You can see they are going against our elites because we literally have nothing left to face them with anymore. But still a bit of a long, hard struggle. Actually, some of the Limit Forces, I think, looking the wrong way around again. I'm not sure why that is. There's a similar kind of conversation over here, although actually we've got less elites that we can send to it. So you can see that they're actually dropping quite quickly. We're trying to send in bodyguards, the drummers, to hold them in. There they are drumming away, but they will be asked to fight soon, I think. And we're just trying to hope that we're going to do something here as we start sending in some of the Javelins to use their ammunition. But this looks like a fight we can't win. As another general now goes down on the side where me and WK were. I mean, that's really kind of the win or loss location. 2 generals and the significant units, but it's the best chance of breaking through, and we do finally do so. You can see we're just wrapping and mopping them up. The drummers still quite happily drumming away there. Big burly faces. They kind of remind me of the old Toy Story 1 graphics for, I think his name was Sid, when he has like a weird sort of grinning face. Back when Toy Story was better at doing toys than they were at doing people. You can see that the Witch Realm Skirn Ragers now just trying to look for juicy targets in the back lines. As you can see, the Troll Hunters now moving through. I had hoped that maybe the Troll Hunters would have a moment to fight the Troll Slayers, but it didn't come about in that way. As you can see, there they are with their sort of large, I guess almost auxiliary sort of Romanish shields on their back. But they do kind of also have sort of that real Celtic design to them as they're moving their way through. I love the black with the sort of, I guess, the flare of gold and sort of flame-like colours. Archer's being caught out a little bit by the cavalry from Tundra. Although whether he'll win that fight is still unsure. He does pull out, and I think it's probably the right thing to do. I think he is necessarily losing. He might lose that battle in long prolonged melee, but he did get a good charge off. But really, this is where we think we can get some nice rear charges off to try and help these guys. But first things first, we need to get rid of this. And you can see that the wargs, they actually went up towards what I guess would be traditionally the town centre. They were worried about more stealth units and they didn't want to get caught out. So they decide that they're going to reposition themselves now, realising the coast is clear. And after surveying the battlefield a little bit, I think they do come in and join this fight. WK's unit just kind of waiting up here whilst the Troll Hunters start making their way up to fight the sort of final stand here. As really, as I said, the floodgates are open now. This fight here is all but completed, and we actually start bringing up the Catapult because we thought, well, we haven't really had that many shots with it, so we've still got plenty of ammo, and I decided to precede it with my drummers to try and drum the beat of death as the Catapult moves forward, the sort of weapon of the future. You can see everyone in the procession, most of them charging forward because actually I need to get to our allies, which are still struggling to make it through their choke points. But most units that aren't already engaged are making it through these other sides, and they don't have any way of stopping us. As you can see that the first sort of endeavour by the troll hunters sort of pauses as they think better of going up there by themselves, and we start working our way forward. The archers now, with the support of the wargs, completed their task in killing the last of the archers, and we decide that now is the time to do some hammer and anvils on these guys, as I can get the camera to work with me. And there we go, trying to just really hit them hard in the back. You can see that they do have some Marines back here, do have some Wardens, and actually I lost a lot in the charge. There you go, I'm down to 3. I didn't quite understand what it was that did it. But it's these guys, it's the Blade Masters here, the 13 of them, that are facing the other way. They don't have that many infantry units here facing them anymore. So when I came in to charge them, what happened was the Blade Masters turned around and just lopped off the heads of my horses and my Numenorians. And I thought, right, well, I'm not going to do that charge anymore. I'll leave that to the wargs. Having a little bit more luck over this side, however, where they don't have that sort of same situation. That, ironically, as much as these aren't the elites, we just had more of them, and they held up a little bit longer. Probably because these units weren't as powerful. You can see that we are starting to get some breaking and some routes from those rear charges into the backs of the lines here. So they do have some sword masters, but they've all but been done for. As you can see, there's sort of the bodies just piled up there. And you can see the last of them there breaking. And the Black Wolves actually probably did quite well in that battle. They're a big two-handed light infantry, but they've got good AP, so they do work quite well as a unit. As you can see, we just try and push more units up here, but it's only really Goblin infantry we've got left on this side of the battlefield. We're a little bit, like I said, a little bit concerned about doing any charges. You can see the dead wargs. You can see all of the dead wargs and all the dead Numenorians. But we do start getting charges off in the location that we wanted to, which is over here against the Marines, where they've got less chance of just having their heads lopped off and killed. And we're a little bit happy with that. But you can see there are some Swordmasters still there, and they do have a moment of turning around and having a go. So again, we're just kind of fleeing out of there in the hopes that we can keep some of our wargs alive. Very terrified based off of what happened before. We're just really just clearing it up now as the forces of evil, the forces of darkness. We try and use our units as best we can just to try and finish them off. You can see here that we've got some archers here facing some of the troll hunters, just to stop them from throwing their jabs. You can see WK sitting up in some of his guardians, and we just kind of start surrounding these units up at the top. Well, we get to the end here. Yes, it wasn't perhaps the closest battle in the world. Just looking at the balance bar, you can see it's sort of we had about 20% of our units left. But it does show some key things about the new mechanics. It does show that units will break. It does show that if they're not thick enough, you can do the old style view of pushing through. It is invaluable to use units that have morale giving bonuses for cheaper forces like the drummers. I think Rodar has a spear unit which, although very small and costly, has an aura to grant morale. It's a new sort of form of mechanic to be aware of, that you can break, and it is a new world out there. But cheap units do have their places, as you saw with the Fodder forces, which pushed through those spears, and the losses weren't really anything we were worried about, but they did do their effect. The archers obviously breaking the Marksmen. Other than that, obviously the catapult from the enemy didn't really get into play. I think it only got about 70 kills, and that was probably off the one shot they did. And it really just couldn't get it going. We were just able to get through and shut it down each time. And it was very difficult defense in terms of the city. I think the discussion was that maybe we would look into doing some other things, possibly making it so that the cavalry could be withdrawn back into the city quicker, and maybe reducing sort of some of the numbers of strong forces that the attackers had. I think we were quite fortunate that we had the wargs, which kind of chewed up the cavalry very well and quite easily, really, especially having 2 units of it, including Borg champions. And Ruadar had some really sort of great value for money troops. One thing about Ruadar is they really work well when combined with other armies which have either armour or Yeah, mainly just armor, really awesome, because Horde has sort of a medium armor sort of based force, and obviously they're high on javies, high on sort of axe throwing, but and they've got good pikes, but they need to be supported by something that can take a few more hits, which is something that we were able to support them with the Misty Mountain and Mordor. Mordor having obviously some very good heavy armored units with some of my bodyguard and with the Manaron units. We're just kind of wrapping up. You can see that there's Haldir there fighting to the last. He's doing the best he can, so we'll just watch him as he tries to take on the Mountain Orc Berserkers, which have also come in to support. All in all, I want to thank all the players for helping us with testing out the Spawn of Sauron battle. I believe this was a battle, like I said, designed for the enemy to win. It's meant to be one of the early campaign battles, I believe, when the invasions truly begin from the forces of darkness. And it's meant to have, I think there's meant to be two battles, one where the defenders are more likely to win and one the attackers. I don't think we were meant to win so significantly, but I think our tactics just paid off a little bit better. We were able to do a lot more things that I don't think that the defenders were expecting us to do so. You could see at some of those choke points at the end, actually it was very hard to get through them. The two on the far side near the river were actually very difficult, and only really from rear charges till we start seeing some movement. It was only because myself and WK were able to push through the north, and they had to then give up one of the locations which allowed Tundra to get his cavalry through. They were able to do something there, and there's Haldir falling at the end. Not the last to fall, but his fellow elves are not long to go. Some of these players I've never played with before, but like I said, I'm pretty glad that I had Greymane and Tundra on my side, and Master, who actually came in last second as well to support us. Happy Mill was meant to be taking on his force, but unfortunately he was having some crashes. So thank you very much for Master for coming in last second. He was kind of just dragged in almost off the streets, really, told to pick an army and get stuck in, and he certainly did, supporting multiple different flanks all through the battle. And he actually had probably the weakest army of the lot. He didn't have any cavalry, he had a lot of fodder, and he did very well with what he had. I'm just going to fast forward now while this wraps up. What I would say as well, if you ever play Horde, these rangers, really good value for money. I feel, anyway, as they start popping out of existence into stealth. And there we go to the final sort of screen here. Can't remember who's who. I'm pretty sure that I'm Burks is the first Mordor army. The second one is Master, but like I said, he had a much weaker force. This was Greymane in terms of having Misty Mountains. You had WK, and then you had Tundra, and I've forgotten the names of the people on the other sides. One of them's Goddess. I think Goddess was Linden. You can see they had sort of significant kills, just wasn't enough. And actually, having said that, WK's forces had a significant number at the end. Just quickly look at the casualties inflicted, because some people do like to see these. Although, admittedly, what I would say is that kills don't always show the decider and who really helped the battle. For example, Tundra, actually, if I go back to Tundra, he didn't have the most kills in the world, but actually, what he was able to do with his cavalry was really significant. He took out some really high-value units, and he really helped sort of turn some of the battle. I think basing it just purely on kills is very unfair in terms of the way that fights go. But just looking where they inflicted the damage, so this is the first one. I'm pretty sure this is my force has got the Javelins in it, and you can see here that some of my heavy maulers did very well for themselves. My Orc High did very well. I was quite pleased with that with 114. And my Javelins there, I didn't think they were really getting many good shots off, but they did get 103, which are 103 very good units because I didn't use them until that final choke, so I'm quite pleased with that. Moving over to the other side, you can see dismounted terrible Inquisitors doing very well for themselves as always, 178. This is Master's force, by the way. You can see one of his maulers also doing well. Sounds real less so, but he probably kept them in reserve. And that was about it, really. Nothing else really stands out. His archers did probably better than we would have thought they would, because actually the damage of the archers wasn't fantastic. His javelins doing relatively well for themselves at 75. Yep, I want to thank everybody. I hope you enjoyed This one, like I said, this was the spawn of Sauron. If you are interested in it and supporting, I'm not sure if Horton's taking on any more testers, but you can always check. You can join our Discord. The information's below, and Horton can direct you to his own one. I'll see if I can get... I might see if I can get Horton's Discord, but again, it might only be if he's taking on additional testers. He has had sort of an influx of late. But yes, I'm sure that we'll have more spoilers of Sauron soon. Thank you, everyone. This has been Reforged. I've been Cannon Fodder, and you've been you.